Welcome to the Coaching Edge podcast with your co-hosts, Dr. Steve Jeffs and Erwin de Grave. Each episode, we bring you expert guests and transformative coaching insights. Let's dive in.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new episode of the Coaching Edge podcast with your co-host, Dr. Steve Jeffs, and myself, Erwin de Grave. And today we have a pleasure to talk to Kay Adams. Hello, Kay. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And Steve, of course, like always, welcome as well. So, Kay, we could try to introduce yourself, but we're 100%, well, 1000% sure you know yourself much better than we do. So who is Kay? What does she do? And where did that all start and what she's doing today?
All right, thank you so much. My name is Kay Adams. I am a psychotherapist and journal therapist based in Denver, Colorado, USA. And I started my business, the Center for Journal Therapy, 40 years ago this month, when I graduated from, well, actually, it was 37 years when I started the business. I started teaching my first journal writing class in 1985, and when I was a first semester graduate school in my counseling program. And some friends asked me if I would teach a little journal workshop because we were in a training program together to be facilitators for workshops. And we used to just make up workshops and teach them to each other for fun. So they said, it's your turn. We want a journal workshop. And I said, oh, just get a notebook. It's not hard. And they said, well, it's not hard for you, hard for us. So I went through a whole bunch of my old journals to find out how I wrote a journal and realized that because I was a journalism major in undergraduate school and had taken a lot of creative writing classes all the way through school, I discovered that I had adapted journalistic writing techniques and creative writing techniques and applied them to personal process. So I kind of started there. I started with the different ways that I was writing that derived from my prior experiences and put together, in those days, it was 21 different ways to write a journal. I packed it really full because I didn't know anything about counseling yet. I was still in my first semester and all I was doing was theory classes. And I was really scared that people would cry or get upset or go too deep. So I made it really peppy and lively and fast-paced so that people couldn't get too far into the weeds. It turned out that it was really, really successful from the very beginning. I was about a year and a half into a self-imposed sabbatical. I had been in the publishing industry. I was editorial vice president for a small publishing company in Denver, and had left that position because I woke up one morning and knew that this was not my soul's calling. You know, I knew I wanted to be a writer all my life, but, you know, business writing and editing wasn't really my forte. So I left my position and wandered around for a while looking for my life's work. And I knew within 40 minutes of starting this first class on journal writing that the intersection between writing and healing and psychology was my life's work. And I committed right then and there to follow this work wherever it led me. And here we are today. It has led me to all kinds of wonderful places, including being a guest on podcasts like yours.
Thanks. Thank you very much for that overview. One thing that strikes me is, well, two things. One, your friends saying, hey, deliver this workshop on something that you thought was obvious and simple. And from that, 40 years later, still in business doing the same thing. How did you take something that was not even valued in your sort of worldview and then build that into a business?
Well, I hope I didn't give the impression that I didn't value it. I just knew that it came very easily to me because I'd been writing a journal since I was 10 years old, and I've known I wanted to be a writer since I was 3. My older sister has a doctorate in education now, and when she was in first grade and I was 3, she would come home from school and play school with me and teach me everything she learned that day. So I learned how to read when she did. And, that was, and I loved stories. I just loved stories. So I knew from a very early age that I was a writer, that I wanted to be a writer when I grew up. And ended up being a writer. But journals have always been my safe space to vent, to have to work out problems, to complain, to confess, to cathart. My own journals did those things for me, and I just took it for granted that I wrote a journal because I was a writer. So it wasn't until some friends asked me about it that I realized that, I could teach them what I knew. And it never occurred to me that I was going to start a business. That was just not anywhere near I didn't have any idea that I would start a business, but I was so, um, I was so engaged with the idea that teaching this work to others was really part of my life path. Uh, my graduate program was very small school that was in those days really counterculture. We were doing mindfulness work, a long time before the East met the West. And all of my faculty loved the idea that there was this new expressive therapy that was being developed. So they were 100% behind me in following this path through my graduate training. So in my family therapy class, marriage and family therapy class, I wrote my final paper on writing a family journal to avoid, conflict and build understanding. And the only 2 rules were you can't trash the book and you can't trash each other. And other than that, anything goes. Um, in my abnormal psychology class, I wrote my hypothetical thinking about how the journal might be used in bipolar illness, because it seemed to me that mania would require a lot different approach to writing than depression would. And by the time I finished graduate school, I had 10 or 12 papers that I had written that laid out the theories that I had developed in school. And then from there, it was really a short distance. I spent the first 6 years of my postgraduate career in psychiatric hospitals, working first in a generalized adult unit. And I was in charge of the evening shift group therapy process. And so I did a lot of workshops and, we had a lot of thematic groups, and journal writing was one of them. And then I moved to a specialized hospital setting where we worked with severely post-traumatic stress disordered women. And they all came into the hospital in those days, we called it multiple personality disorder. Now it's called dissociative identity disorder. And our treatment center was one that was a specialty within a specialty, because our criteria for admission was a failure to thrive in at least 2 prior psychiatric hospitalizations. So we got kind of, the hardest cases. And when I did intake appointments with them, it was clear that they really relied on journals to process their lives and alter personalities. Each had a voice in their journals, and it was really pretty, it was an interesting. I'd never worked with this population before, so I was on a fast learning curve. But one of my primary theories that I'll probably be known for after I die, was based in that work where I realized that in the service of trying to find their own voices and write themselves on the page, they would frequently re-traumatize themselves by trying to go back in their memories and write about, horrible things that had happened to them. So I realized almost immediately that what they were talking about when I asked them, how do you journal? And they went, I get a notebook and I open it up and I start writing. What do you mean? And I said, well, like, how are you writing? And they described what we call stream of consciousness writing or free writing, just like put your pen down and let it go, which is a great way to write. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but free writing by its very definition has no structure, no pacing, no containment, and that's really what they were needing in their treatment. So I developed a methodology that took all of my techniques and I wrote them all down on 3x5 cards and gave a relative structure, pacing, containment ranking to them, and then just organized them in a hierarchy that I call the journal ladder that goes from the most structured, paced, and contained to the least, free writing. And the most structured, paced, and contained that I knew was sentence stems. Right now I feel, today I want, the most important thing to do. And they got it. And they learned how to regulate themselves. It was a self-regulation thing. It was everybody had 3 or 4 or 5 techniques that they really loved and 3 or 4 or 5 that they didn't really like at all, and the rest were kind of in the middle. So when I knew what their favorite techniques were, I mean, individually, when I knew what they would respond well to and they had something difficult to write about, I helped them find a way to write using one of the techniques that they liked a lot, that they were successful with, to start with. And that gave them the courage and the confidence to really explore things in a way that did not send them into a deep dive into what they described as a very dark place.
Mm.
So that was kind of my orientation. And then after 6 years in psych hospital work, I went into private practice as a therapist. And that's where, working with a population that was not necessarily psychiatrically oriented, but just, we're working with everyday problems like, mild to moderate depression or grief or marital conflict or relationships in general. So, I was in private practice for quite a long time, and then I started teaching more than I was doing therapy. And now I consider myself mostly an adult educator. I still do some client work, but usually it's with people that I've already treated and they're coming back for a warm up or a catch up or something. And along the way, I developed a school called the Therapeutic Writing Institute that teaches people. It's a 3-year program that I designed to be a master's program. It isn't a master's program, but I thought when I was ready to retire, maybe there would be a university without walls type place that would want to pick it up as a master's degree. So that hasn't happened yet, and I'm still working, but we have a robust faculty and student body, and we're turning out a lot of really great practitioners who are all over the world.
Mm. A lot. It's really interesting career, what you're talking about. I want to go to one specific thing that you mentioned in the beginning, specifically that you took it for granted about journaling. And what came up to me, that question is, and I think a lot of people have this, like sometimes I do have it as well, say, it is easy. Why you don't understand it? So the gap between taking it for granted from your end and people, they don't take it for granted. I'm trying to get a question that I don't know how to pose that question, but it's like not taking things for granted will help for you to educate people in workshops and training.
Not taking it for granted. You
Yeah.
mean the,
Yeah, so
the
if you
consumer?
like your journaling, you said you took it for granted that for you journaling was normal. So you said take a note. It's like for other people, it's not normal. And it's a big gap between you knowing, taking it for granted, and for people that don't know about it, there's a big gap. And a lot
Yeah.
of people hold themselves back to say, yeah. I don't know if you understand my question, what I'm going to get to.
I think I do understand the question. I think if I'm understanding you correctly, it's like, how do people come into the recognition that they want to start journal writing? Something like that?
Well, it's more from the other end that I see that a lot of people take things for granted and they don't go in a step to educate or train people because they take it for granted and think that everybody knows it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know if I can respond to that from a, a different point of view. In my case, I learned rather quickly that this thing that I've been doing all my life and that I took for granted was also something that other people did and tried, they had been, there's a lot of people who have been writing journals in secret for a very long time because it's an individual process. It's highly, it's very private. My number one rule, well, there's really, I tell everybody that there's really two rules for journal writing and everything else is optional. One is date your entries so that you have a chronological reconstruction. And the second is protect your own privacy, because you don't want somebody reading your journals without permission, which happens quite a bit. So in my case, there were a lot of people who took for granted that journal writing was something that helped them a lot. And oftentimes they thought they were the only ones doing it. I work predominantly with women, although I did write a book about men in journals called Mightier Than the Sword, which, kind of tanked immediately in sales and went out of print pretty quickly because men in those days, this was in 1994 when it was published, really weren't that interested in journal writing. And most of the audience for this particular book was their wives or girlfriends or, partners who wanted them to write journals because it would improve their relationship. So as far as taking for granted goes, I think as you raise the question, I'm aware of feeling really fortunate that I did take it for granted, but also assumed that other people also wanted to know this. And they have, it's like there's so many people now, and it's so much more in the news. It's so much more prominent. I'm considered one of the three primary theorists in the field, and the two others who came before me both had outstanding programs, methodologies that a lot of people knew about because these two gentlemen, Dr. Ira Progoff and Dr. James Pennebaker, were in the media all the time. I mean, they became very famous, both of them, in their lifetime. Well, Jamie Pennebaker's still with us, thank heavens. Dr. Progoff died 20 years ago, I think. But they both set a model in place where there had been, my theoretical work isn't really derived from their work, but I was deeply informed by both of their work. Pennebaker is the research psychologist who's given us almost all of the evidence-based theory we have. And Dr. Progoff was a depth psychologist in Manhattan who created a whole new method of psychotherapy using what he called the intensive journal method. And so I had a little bit of a head start because those guys had come before me and sort of, lit up some paradigms that followed their process, but I was familiar with both of their processes,
Mhm.
and learned, internalized a lot from them, and still do. I just finished teaching a Progoff class at the Therapeutic Writing Institute, and it's always a pleasure to, reintroduce myself to that methodology because it's a really brilliant piece of work that he created.
Mhm.
So I don't know if I answered that
Yeah,
question.
no, that's fine. It's a lot of people do have that question. They take things for granted and then think that other people should know it as well. And that's where the education and training of people is so important. So, and about so I don't do journal writing because, and my question here is journal writing, or can you do journaling without writing, like speaking or stuff like
Yeah, it doesn't have to be physical writing. You don't have to have a physical pen in your hand or keyboard, because one of the more recent findings we've had is that it doesn't really matter whether you write by hand or on a keyboard. And you can also dictate, you can talk into your phone app. You can, I just did a workshop a couple of weeks ago, well, a couple of months ago now, with Dr. Pennebaker, and he talked about air writing. He talked about just writing in the air in cursive, like just write it down. And he says that when he's experimented with that, people get pretty much the same outcomes as they do when they're writing on a piece of paper or a keyboard. So I think that's pretty interesting. Um,
that.
and and there's just a lot of ways to. The biggest thing that I think in journal therapy that I'm going for is there a way that people can express themselves and start to understand more about who they are, what they want, how they go about getting their needs met, how they rage on the page sometimes when they're really angry or um, upset about something. And it doesn't really matter the form that it takes. The idea is self-expression and self-understanding in whatever way feels most organic and natural.
Mhm.
Who are the sorts of people that tend to be attracted to journaling? And I guess the opposite there are who are the types of people that tend to kind of push it away?
Yeah, overall, in the general public, women are much more likely to have uh, been writing than men. Men do not see journal writing as many men. We have plenty of men that write journals. Um, but whereas the predominance of writing journals is with women or young girls, um, men have kind of different ways of. When I was doing the research for Mightier Than the Sword, I discovered that once men got started writing, there was no significant difference in outcomes between men and women, but men have, a different way of meeting the page or meeting the process of writing or examining than women do. And it seemed to have, when I teach, when I'm leading a group of women, they are sometimes reluctant to share what they wrote because it is so private, and they have conditioned themselves, or as a culture, we have conditioned each other to be, well, to not speak their truth as easily when it regards their emotional life or their problem-centric life or whatever. Women just tend not to talk about it as much to people. They would rather write it in their journals, and that is their, that's the way they process. Men like to talk more than they like to write in these groups. And so there was, I had to find different ways to engage them into starting. And one of the things that was really significant was that whereas women in a group of people that they don't know yet are pretty timid about sharing what they've written or talking about the process of writing it than men were really, really eager to share what they had written. And it was almost like it was harder for them to hold it internally. They wanted to externalize it. And so once I kind of hooked into that idea that men just really like to share more than women do sometimes, that became one of the entries. So it's like we didn't write all the time at first. I just asked them to tell little stories about, something that was up that would introduce them to a writing technique. So if I invited them to tell stories first and then built a writing process out of that, it was a lot easier for them to meet the page than it was for them to just, hit it running and not really know what to do. So, but the men who I worked with almost 200 men on this book project, and it was so moving to me that when you strip everything else away, we're all dealing with the same stuff. And men just have a different way of expressing it than women do, but they appreciated the value of writing and the insight and clarity that can come with writing, because that's one of the big things that is a benefit is, E.M. Forster, the novelist, said, "How do I know what I think until I see what I say?" And so having it out of your body, out of your mind, out of your heart, onto the page where it is externalized and you can see it with objectivity and with perspective. And there's a permanent record if you choose to keep it, which you don't have to. There's a permanent record of how your life is unfolding. And it's really kind of cool to go back in time and see how you were perceiving something then and how you're perceiving it now and the growth arc that happened in between.
It's interesting. It is really interesting when I'm listening to you as a man, that on the one hand, women between themselves love to talk and share things and what's happening. Men, on the other hand, when they're together, they're not going in depth talking about things. And what you just say is actually reverse when you look about emotional thing and expressions, where women are more timid to express it, and where men were more open to express it. As well, what I think is that men, their brain functions differently than women.
Yeah.
And man can really put things in a box and forget about it, and once they spoke about it, it's gone. While with women in generally, it stays there and it's all interconnected and it goes. And I think that's why that maybe journaling is more like what you said. Looking back what you wrote in the past, I'm not interested in that. When you said it, I said, I'm not interested. Why should I, but that's me, maybe my brain, and maybe me or my main man brain that says, yeah, well, that happened. I don't know. That's what comes up when listening to you.
Yeah, I think it's, and there's no, there are trends, but there aren't any like hard and fast, everybody's this way or that way. Everybody's got a different style, and that's why we have a whole bunch of different writing techniques that will adapt to a lot of different styles. So.
One thing that struck me, I guess personally, listening to what you're sharing there, one, I could absolutely see myself as a student in the class, being a good student, going, "Hey, here's what I've written, here's my approach." It's definitely how I can show up as a student. The other thought that crossed my mind was almost goal orientation. Like when to use your phrase, when I approach the page, I have behind my, I guess, intent, like why, what's my purpose, what's my goal, and goal orientation rather than process orientation. Does that influence either how people approach journaling or how you guide them to use journaling?
Oh, that's a great question. Let me think about that for a minute. How do I guide people into one or the other? Um, well, there's goal orientation is, I think, a um, I mean, that's a really good place to start with a journal. It can be. It doesn't always have to be deep emotional processing about things that are either troubling or, happening or whatever. There's a lot of good work. Jim Rohn, I don't even know if he's still with us, but he, in the 80s, when I started out, he was a motivational speaker and really a good, do you know Jim Rohn's name? Yeah. So one of the things he said, I heard him in a, um, at a conference, and he said, and he was a big journal writer, big journal writer, and taught it to all kinds of men and, well, men and women too, I'm sure, but I think mostly he worked with um, in business and as a business coach or motivational speaker or whatever. Anyway, he once said at this conference, he was talking about journal writing, and he said, I always buy books, journals. He said, I have a series of leather-bound journals. I always buy leather-bound journals, and they cost $100. And this is in 1983, I think. And he said, my friends say to me, Jim, why are you spending $100 on a blank book? And he said, because I always tell them, because I intend to fill it with $1 million ideas. So there's goal orientation right there. You can work your way developmentally or in whatever way you wish through a process, starting from A and ending at Z, or just all the steps in between. You can get as mental or cognitive as you want to. It's like, okay, here's how I will approach this. What's my plan? How do I move from A to Z? What's the flow chart here? There's all kinds of ways that we can be goal oriented. And we have a technique in the way that I teach journaling that I call perspectives, which is altering your point of view, either by jumping time and writing in advance, like 1 year from today in the present tense, where do you want to be with this situation, problem, project, whatever it happens to be? And you can kind of write yourself into the future by saying, it's November 2026. I have just finished this project that I have been working on. And here's how it turned out. It was glorious. We had the best response we've ever had, and here's how we did it, working backwards from the goal. Just like anticipate what you want to have as an outcome, and then moving back and saying, okay, well, if I want this as an outcome, I'm going to have to start here, and then what would the next step be? And you can really plan it out ahead of time. And that's not something that is limited to journal writing, but when you write it down, you do have a record of it. So with process, we don't really, I mean, a process-driven write is more open-ended. It's more, kind of rambling, maybe. You're just throwing stuff on the page to see what resonates, or, following the pen wherever it leads you. Whereas goal-oriented can be a lot more structured, and we have plenty of structured techniques to go along with the process techniques. So, there can be something for everybody when they start for everybody who wants it. Not everybody wants it. This isn't the style for every single person, but for those who are willing to experiment or who are drawn to it or have thought, I would kind of like to do it, but I have never really known how. You know, goal orientation is a valid and frequent outcome that people want.
I've
And
done
so,
that a lot.
you know, we can teach them those techniques.
I've done that a lot, that you really look at what is my goal and then work backwards. What do
Yes.
I need to do to get there? So that is something that something came up into my mind, and I don't know if it's the right direction to go, but AI came into my mind when I was listening to you.
Ah,
And journaling and AI, is there, because I imagine that it could be people, well, I imagine there are people that are maybe journaling with and talking to an AI in a journal kind of processing kind of thing.
mhm.
That's more like a conversation than just writing down. So two questions emerge really: is journaling, can that also be in a conversation with someone else? Or is journaling really writing down? Um, that's the first question I have.
Yeah. As a therapist, I know that a lot of therapy is just a conversation back and forth on a specific, topic with a specific approach based on the therapist's training and, preference and what their specialties are. So that is, that kind of a conversation, a therapeutic conversation, or even a coaching conversation can be, it's not exactly the same thing, but it can have the equivalent outcome as writing. But when I'm working with coaches and therapists about helping their clients with, their situations, when journaling can be introduced, if people are willing, I mean, when I'm working with a client, I tell them this is one of my specialties and invite them to participate with me if they want to, but I usually give them homework. We have a therapeutic conversation and it's not, or a coaching conversation, but it's not focused on writing, although I sometimes, if somebody has just had a big aha experience, you can kind of just see that they're like, oh, something just happened here. I will often hand them a notebook and say, give me 5 good minutes on whatever's going on inside your head right now. What was that realization that you just had? And a 5-minute sprint, I call it 5-minute sprints, where you just write fast for 5 minutes and then you're done, is oftentimes a way to capture the essence of a thought, feeling, activity, idea, whatever, that will carry them forward into the next layer of whatever it is, a process or goal that they want to achieve. So even clients who aren't really engaged in the writing process with me, I have a lot of people who come to me because I specialize in journal therapy, and they write journals and they know that they're therapeutic. So they want more of that. But for the most part, my last name is Adams, and I'm first in the queue of any alphabetical listing. So I get more than my fair share of random calls. But I forgot what I was going with that. I just lost my train of thought. So anyway, I hope that was at least partially useful.
Certainly useful for me. I think that that 5-minute sprint struck me as both simple and profound. There's a layer of formality that we've had certainly in this conversation and previous ones around journaling, like as a thing, and then there's edges, and what you just said is like, well, dude, just like write it down. That's basically what I heard. Like something's happened, client, like just 5 minutes, like just write it down. Be with this thing that's going on and happening, and keep yourself busy by moving your hand as you're forming letters, but just sort of sit with this for a few minutes. And that felt really simple. And I could picture entrepreneurs, business owners, us as coaches and accidental entrepreneurs just go, oh, there's a thing. Well, actually, rather than just write it on a list that kind of gets dismissed, I can give myself permission as a leader to explore it, sit with it, be with it.
Yeah. 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 And it's amazing. It's amazing how quickly the bottom line will rise up to meet you when you know you only have 5 minutes to write. It's like you just cut through all the noise and go right to the essence of it. And it's like, it's like a sprint, a running sprint where you just take all your energy and pour it out at once. So that's really, that's a very accessible tool. And the other reason that I love 5 minute sprints is because when clients say to me, oh, I don't have time to write a journal, I say, well, do you think you might have 5 minutes 2 or 3 times this week? And they'll go, yeah, I could do that. So then it's just a matter of, that's plenty. That's all they need. I mean, if that's what they can do, then we can work with that. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It really doesn't. I mean, it doesn't have to be, it can be soul searching, and you can even do soul searching in 5 minutes, actually, if you want to, but usually it takes a little bit longer than that. But it's really, it's a useful strategy for just about anybody. Team meetings, everybody just take 5 minutes and write down what you're thinking about as we talk about these projects that we're going to work on together. Where do you, how you feeling about it? Where do you see yourself, placing yourself in the process? What are you going to be good at here? What's going to be sticky for you? Any of these or all of them can be thrown out and say, pick one that you like and write for 5 minutes, and then let's compare the results. The other thing that I think is really, really useful, and this is kind of a universal tool, is what I call the reflection write, which is after you write, read it back, and then give yourself just 1 or 2 sentences of reflection. As I read this, I notice that I am struggling with the same thing I was struggling with last month, and I thought I was going to get it resolved, but I didn't. So, here's an action plan. Or as I read this, I'm amazed at how clearly I can articulate something that used to be fuzzy for me. Or as I read this, I have no idea where I'm going with it, and I'm going to just put my notebook away and start over again tomorrow. But that harvests insight. The reflection write harvests the insight. It offers synthesis. It offers insight. And it's really, I think, just an all-purpose tool for any writing situation to just, drop back, read what you wrote, and give yourself some feedback about it.
I think it's not only about writing, because nowadays with the big space, the quick space that we have, it's basically what the message that I get, what I hear from you is that people need to allow themselves the permission for 5 minutes. And it doesn't have to be writing, because my time when that happens is when I'm driving to pick up the boys from school. I cannot write, but it allows my mind, because I'm in an environment that I can, like it. I think what you really are saying is, in the quick space that we need to allow ourselves, give us the permission to have like 5 minutes to, and it doesn't have to be right, but just to, okay, let me reflect on what, because I think that's what really is needed.
Yeah, it really can be just 5 minutes of breathing deeply, or just contemplating, or thinking about something. It is, and then of course, I'm hardwired to say, and then just jot a few notes. So that's just, I'm always going to come back to that.
I love it. Well, I've been jotting a whole stack of notes as we've been talking. One of my key insight is the simplicity of how easy it can be. That 5 minutes of presence, like me with me, it feels like a gift I can give myself. And
yes. Oh, that's lovely.
my goal orientation kind of really appreciates that reflective right. To be able to go, actually, look, I haven't just wasted 5 minutes just writing stuff. Actually, like, what am I taking with me? What's the
Yes.
condensation, the gift that I'm giving myself, and how do I put words around that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to go back, if I can, to something Erwin mentioned a little earlier about artificial intelligence. One of the ways that artificial intelligence can really, really ramp up your journal style, if in fact you want to do that, is to just have a conversation with AI about, kind of what's on your mind, and say, can you give me 10 good journal prompts for this? 10 different ways that I can explore, the conflict I'm having with my team leader. Um, and I always actually go for a lot more. Like, give me 30 good writing prompts for a topic on, whatever. And that can generate a lot of ideas that, that I wouldn't have thought of on my own. And I think that's a really appropriate use of AI for personal process.
Hello. What a great tip as we finish off. Kay, thank you again for time and sharing your wisdom and inspiration. This is definitely a topic you're passionate about, and I really appreciate seeing it through a different lens.
Thank
For
you.
those that are curious, have more questions, and would love to learn more about you, your work, journaling, how can people connect with you?
My website, thank you for the invitation. My website is journaltherapy.com. And from there, you can get pretty much in touch with me. We have a little, I think our sign up bonus is, it's either a paper or a class. It is functioning in both worlds, called J is for Journal. And it is just a really overview. One of the techniques that we use in journal therapy is a, a, a technique that I call alpha poems, which is writing the alphabet, not the alphabet, but the topic, Erwin, we'll use Erwin, and then every line starts with the next successive letter. So it's like unhook your brain, write really fast, don't worry about the details, just get it down kind of thing. But it's kind of an amazing thing. And why was I telling you this? I just lost my train of thought again.
As I was researching to meet with you today, I actually found there was a link on the website there with a very short blog that used the word write as
Yes.
tips
Yes.
to be writing and journaling.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy to write. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So acronyms, I mean, sometimes they're called acronyms too, but the idea there is that you can get, I can't remember why I was going to tell you about alpha poems. The question was about
Where people can find you.
where people can find us. Yes. Thank you. Journaltherapy.com will get you pretty much anywhere we go. Oh, J is for journal is an acronym. That's what it was. J is for journal. Journal means just get started. I mean, the J is just get started. The O is outside, inside. Are you writing from prompts that externalize your world or internalize your world? U is unique voice. Yours is unique. And it just goes on from there. That's what Alpha Poems came in. But it's called J is for Journal, and it has 68 writing prompts embedded in it for anybody who wants to just explore some ideas. And that is both a paper and also a little self-paced online class. So that's what people can find us, and I would be more than happy to, and we also have the Therapeutic Writing Institute, and that's the deeper dive for people who want to build a career out of helping other people write. And that is twinstitute.net. But you can also get there from journaltherapy.com.
All right. Thank you very much, Kay, for
Thank
this
you for
nice
having
chat
me.
we had today and really talking about not only about journaling, but really that 5 minute presence for yourself. I think that's the key that came out for me. So,
Yeah.
everybody else, thank you very much for listening in. Until the next episode, take care. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to The Coaching Edge. Until next time, keep coaching and keep growing.